Hey everyone, we're back. I'm Minister James Moss. This is Continuing Education. We're in the book of Acts. We're starting the 16th chapter and we're going to do the first 5 verses. And this one is entitled Paul's Second Missionary Journey. So Paul is underway with his second missionary journey. Let's jump in. Acts 16 records Paul and Silas's embarking on what is called the second missionary journey. A few verses describe a quick trek over the cities of the first journey and a series of divine prohibitions about going in certain directions. Then Paul had a vision of a man in Macedonia calling out for help, and God's door swung wide open in a new direction. All right, so here we go. Then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there, named Timothy, the son of a certain woman, which was a Jewess, and believed, but his father was a Greek, which was well reported of by the brethren that were at Lystra and Iconium. Him and Paul would have to go forth with him. Would Paul have to go forth with him, and took and circumcised him because of the Jews which were in those quarters, for they knew all that his father was a Greek. And as they went through the cities, they delivered them the decrees for to keep that were ordained of the apostles and elders which were at Jerusalem. And so were the churches established in the faith and increased in number daily. Okay. All right, so here we go. Verse 1. Acts 14:16 through 21 describes the rough treatment Paul and Barnabas had received during their last visit to the city of Lystra. That's where Paul had been stoned, dragged out of the city and left for dead. Paul had already gone back to that city once, and on his second journey, he returned again. If anyone ever doubted Paul's courage or tenacity, this verse ought to change that opinion. So concerned was Paul for the believers in these cities that he risked his life to make sure that they were growing in the faith. In Lystra lived a young disciple named Timothy. He probably had become a Christian after Paul's first visit to Lystra. Timothy had already had solid Jewish training in the scriptures from his mother and grandmother. When Paul arrived on his second journey, Timothy had grown into a respected disciple of Jesus. Verses 1 and 3 mention that Timothy's father was a Greek. Verse 3 explains why that mattered. Verses 2 and 3, Timothy's excellent reputation in the church and evidently Paul's need for an assistant compelled Paul to write or to invite Timothy to join them on their journey. Apparently, Timothy wanted to go, for he submitted to being circumcised before they left. Clearly a mark of his commitment. Timothy was the son of a Jewish mother and Greek father. Under Jewish rabbinic law, since his mother was Jewish, Timothy was Jewish and needed to fulfill the covenant. So Paul asked Timothy to be circumcised in order to remove some of the stigma that might have hindered his effectiveness in ministering to Jewish believers. Timothy's mixed Greek and Jewish background could have created problems on their missionary journeys because many of their audiences would contain Jews who were concerned about keeping this tradition. Timothy's submission to the rite of circumcision helped to avoid that potential problem. Paul may appear to be innocent or inconsistent here with his teachings in Galatians 2 verses 3 through 5, where he refused to let Titus be circumcised. This is easily resolved when considering the difference in the circumstances of the two situations. In Galatia, circumcision was being proclaimed heretically as a method of justification. Paul wanted to clarify that it was not, so he intentionally left Titus uncircumcised to make his point. Here in Lystra, early on in his evangelistic endeavors, Paul was more intent on avoiding any potential offense that might hinder the spread of the gospel. Although the Jerusalem Council had just ruled that circumcision was not necessary for Gentiles, Paul apparently thought that Timothy's mixed religious background might hinder his effectiveness. So, because Timothy was partly Jewish, he was circumcised. This was merely for effectiveness in spreading the gospel, not as a prerequisite for salvation. Verses 4 and 5. At least one of the new items on the agenda of this trip was explaining the decision regarding the commandments that were to be obeyed, and as had been decided by the apostles and elders at the Jerusalem Council. The Jewish/Gentile issues that had been decided at the council would likely arise again in the largely Gentile areas where Paul was traveling. Rapid growth was important to this first part of the Gentile thrust of the gospel. Critics of Paul's Gentile-oriented ministry would be waiting greedily for an opening with which to shut Paul down or at least diminish his influence. Yet here, in the first real penetration of the gospel into the Gentile world, the church thrived in exactly the same way the mostly Jewish church had in its early days. All right, and that concludes this lesson on about tells us about Paul's missionary journeys, how it gets started, actually seeing how Timothy came about to be with Paul. All right, and again, it's building up, and we're getting a chance to see more of how certain things unravel with Paul, his relationship with Timothy, his relationship with Barnabas, with Silas, with John Mark, with the churches, things that he was willing to do. Like it says in Lystra, they stoned him and dragged him out of the city and left him for dead. And if you remember, after they stoned him for a little bit, he got up, bloodied and beat up or whatever, and walked back into the city. And then the next day he left. And then here we go again. On this next journey, he's going back into Lystra again, the place where they had jacked him up, stoned him and left him for dead, and wanted to basically kill him. So interesting stuff about Paul. To me, I mean, it falls in line with the person, with the character, because what we knew was that he was the persecutor of the church. And regardless of who you are, to be a persecutor, and in the manner that they described Paul to be, you had to be fearless. Pain was probably your best friend at times, because when you get into the mix of things, you can't let pain stop you in the middle of a battle, or else you will become a casualty. All right. So look, enough of that. We're getting ready to go to the next one. I thank you for supporting this ministry. Thank you for watching this video. God bless you. God keep you. And as I say always, remember to keep studying always. All right. God bless you. God keep you.